So there's Gemara in Yuma, well-known Gemara. The Gemara starts out. The Gemara says, Torah Rabbanon. The Gemara says, Kidatanya. V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha, Shlav Hashem your God, Shehei Shem Shamayim Misahiv Al Yodcha. That you should be responsible that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name, Hashem Shamayim, should become beloved through you. Shehei Koreh V'shona U'Meshamesh Talmidei Chachamim. You should learn Chomesh Mishta. You should learn by Talmidei Chachamim. V'hei Maso Matono B'Nachas Im Abrios. And you should be pleasant when it comes to people. All people, you have to treat them pleasantly. Ma Abrios Omros Olav. What do people say when they encounter a Ben Torah, somebody who represents Torah, somebody who comes across as a pleasant person? Ashrei Aviv Shalimdo Torah, Ashrei Ravo Shalimdo Torah. Fortunate is his father who taught him Torah. Fortunate are the Brios that fortunate are his Rabbi who taught him Torah. Oy lahem lebrios, and then they conclude. Oy lahem. Oy is a Gemara word. It's not just a krechts you heard from your Zaidi when he was sitting down. Oy is actually a word. Oy lahem lebrios shelo lamdu Torah. Woe to people who didn't learn Torah. Ploni shalom Torah ru'u kamen nas drochav kamen musukanim maisav. Look how pleasant he is. Aval mishe kore v'shona u'meshamish tamei chachamim. Somebody who learns, he's a ben Torah. Ve'ein maso matono be'emunah ve'ein diburo b'nachas yiros ma brios omer solov. What do they say about somebody who represents Torah, represents Yiddishkeit, and does not come across the way a ben Torah should? So they say, Oy lo leploni shalom ad Torah. Oy vey that he learned Torah. Oy lo aviv shalim lo Torah. Oy lo rabbo shalim lo Torah, and so on and so forth. So the Gemara over here tells us that people intuitively or instinctively relate to our behavior, and they create a connection between our behavior. They draw a connection to Torah that we've been involved in. Now, I was once, many years ago, I live in Neve Yaakov, and it's a little closer than Malay Amos, but we live in Neve Yaakov, and I don't know where the green line is either. I'm not sure. I always heard about this green line. I've been looking for it. I've never seen it. The streets all look the same. I still haven't found that green line. So lines, Israel's very big on lines, by the way. They have a red line in the Kinneret. I don't know if you're aware of that. They have the red line, which is the danger line in the Kinneret. And just to let you know which country you're living in, they once had on a live broadcast on the radio, there was a drought. There had been a series of years of drought, and the Kinneret level was about 10 centimeters over the red line. They had the Minister of Agriculture on a live broadcast on the radio, and they said to him, "Sir, what are you going to do if the water dips down to the red line?" And he said, "It's not a problem. We will erase the red line and draw it lower." So, and what happens is, if you've been living in the country long enough, you just listen, you just go, okay, all right, that should take care of it, because we're used to that sort of thing here. So I don't know, red lines, green lines, I'm not quite sure where they are. In any event, I was on waiting for the bus here in the Bukharim stop on the way down on the Yerchov Yechezkel. And there was an elderly man, a secular elderly man, standing to my right. And he looked like, he'd been here since the founding of the state, one of those North Tel Aviv type people. And just then a group of Cheder kids got out. They were let out of the Cheder. And I have to realize they've been sitting in a crowded, hot Cheder for about 8 to 24 hours. And they got out of the Cheder, and immediately right next to the Cheder there was a snack shop. So then they went and got sugared up. And just then, as they came to the bus stop, they were buzzing, and a bus was coming down the hill. And I think it's the first and only time in my life that I actually experienced prophecy. Don't tell anybody. I don't have to give brachas, but the bus was coming down the hill, and I knew exactly what was going to happen before it happened. I knew exactly what was going to happen. I remember distinctly smiling through the entire thing because I was so proud of myself, knowing exactly what's going to happen. And sure enough, the bus pulled up right in front of me, which I did. That was the only part I was a surprise. The bus pulled up right in front of me. I immediately put my arm against the wall of the bus to hold back the surge of the kids so that this elderly man could get on. And the kids moved me like a knife moveth through butter. And they moved me, and I pushed into the old man. And then I moved back. Once they got on, they're making a lot of noise. They get on the bus. And I moved over, the old man got on the bus, and I knew exactly what was going to be happening when I got on the bus. As soon as I got on, he was already going, and he was yelling at these kids. He says, "That's what they taught you in Cheder, that you should push old people on the bus." So if you stop and think about it, it's incredibly unreasonable. It's incredible. Yes, right before they were let out of the Cheder, the Rabbi probably looked at them and said, "Yingalach, if you see an old man at the bus stop, take him out," right? That is as unreasonable as you could possibly be. And he was yelling at them. At the end of the story we're going back a long time. I wouldn't do this today, because we're going back about 30 years ago. And he started yelling, "Where did you learn that kind of behavior?" So I said, "Well, from the members of the Israeli Knesset." And the bus driver started hollering at me, "How could you talk?" So since then, I've been looking for the green line. So the point is, if you stop and think about it, it is the most unreasonable conclusion you could come up with. Yes, the little kids came out of the Cheder. What do you think the Rebbe in the Cheder? Rebbe is teaching them derech eretz, he's teaching them Torah, and to then go and make an association, if they pushed an old man at the bus stop, it's because you learned Torah? That's what you learned in Cheder? No, it's the last thing we learned in Cheder. But Chazal are telling us that when a person represents Torah, and a person is Torah, so then that connection is going to be made. When I was learning in Kollel, the Rosh Kollel, Rav Mordechai Shakavitsky, Zichrono Livracha, he told us that when we get on a bus, if there's anybody standing on the bus, no matter what age, anybody standing on the bus, and we're sitting, we should not sit if even one secular Jew is standing on the bus, because they're going to look around the bus and their reaction is going to be, "Why is the frum guy sitting and I'm standing?" Justified or otherwise. That's the responsibility that we carry when we represent the Ribono Shalom. And we represent Ribono Shalom to the rest of the world. Whether we like it or not, that's the responsibility. With privilege goes responsibility. That's the responsibility that we carry. So one of the misconceptions is that the world at large thinks that we think that we're flawless. They're projecting on our mindset. And they think that we think that we're perfect or we're flawless or whatever it is. We never made that claim. And to the contrary, we see in Chazal not like that. There's a Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah. Medrash the Bereshis Rabbah, Pei Zayin Os Vav. The Medrash says there was a Matronisa, a Roman noblewoman, who ran into Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta. And she said to Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta, that story about Yosef HaTzadik, here's a 17-year-old, red-blooded teenager down in the den of iniquity called Egypt, and you're trying to sell us that story that he didn't do anything wrong. He ran away from Mrs. Potiphar and he didn't sin. Could you imagine? Who are you trying to kid over here? So Rabbi Yossi said back to her, well, let's take a look at the Torah. Let's see what kind of whitewashing we do. Here you have Yehuda, who was under his father's jurisdiction. You have Ruvain, who was under his father's jurisdiction. And yet the Torah reports both of them as doing something which, according to the plain meaning, which she didn't know, the literal meaning says that there was something immoral that they did. So if Yosef, who's a teenager outside of his father's jurisdiction, if he would have done something wrong, we have nothing to gain by whitewashing it. We even talk about somebody who should know better, and we say, here's the flaw. Look what Ruvain did. In the way the Torah writes it in the literal level, it looks like an act of immorality. Here's what Yehuda did. She doesn't know the medrash that the Malach pushed him. And therefore, it looks for here are people who should know better, and we don't whitewash for them. So al-achas kama v'kama, if we have a Yosef, who's a teenager, who is outside of his father's jurisdiction, he's away at college, and he behaves in a way that's inappropriate, so we wouldn't whitewash it. So if we tell you he didn't do something wrong, we're not trying to make anything up. But even more than that, I once noticed about this medrash, every single name in the Torah, almost every single name in the Torah that we look at as you go through the Torah Shebiksav, almost every single name is criticized. Avram Avinu said, B'me'eda. Yitzchak was deceived by Esav. Yaakov married two wives. Moshe Rabbeinu got angry. Aaron with the egel. And on. Miriam with Lashon Hara. You look at every name, when they stepped out of line, Lefi Madrei Gosam, we're obviously at their level, but the Torah itself tells us that they were behaving in a way that there was a flaw in their character, Lefi Madrei Gosam. Why do that? If Chazal say that anybody who says David HaMelech sinned is making a mistake, why should we whitewash it? We don't whitewash anything. Besides the proof that Mashiach comes from him. So obviously it wasn't what it looks like on the literal level. So if a person takes a look at the Torah and says, hey, you think you're perfect. You from Jews, you project yourself. We don't think we're perfect at all. Even the greatest in history says openly that they had flaws. So we never claimed that that we're perfect. Are we better than the rest of society individually and as a group? So then we have to take a look at the evidence and see what happens in a Torah world, which we'll see in a moment. But the first step in dealing with people, and when I say dealing with people, I would like to just make something clear from the outset, because this is one of the standard mistakes that's made anytime people ask or challenge us. You always have to determine from the outset whether the person is asking a question or is making a statement. And that means that sometimes a person could ask in question form. For example, the husband who, wife says to husband, why did you just walk across the floor? I just washed it. And the husband says, well, I had to get to the refrigerator to get an apple. Wrong. Because that would be, why is it wrong? Why is it wrong? Anybody who's been married any great length of time, like about 10 minutes, understands that because she didn't ask a question just now. She made a statement. When she said, why did you walk across the floor? So says Rashi, she was saying, you are an inconsiderate boor, right? And when somebody says that to you, that usually the next response should be, I apologize, right? It was inconsiderate of me. I am worse than the goat on Yom Kippur, off the cliff. That is really the response she's looking for. So a person has to know, was that a question or was it a statement? So a person comes and says, why don't Haredim go to the army? So, was that a question or was that a statement in question form? If it's an attack, my policy, and I would suggest your policy, for attacks, we don't respond because the person's not listening to you. There are a lot of sharp rejoinders. People always say, what do you say to somebody who asks you why you did that? There are a lot of sharp, cute rejoinders that you can come up with, but they accomplish very, very little. If a person asks you a question respectfully, they're curious. A person says to you, why is it that Haredim don't go to the army? Why is it that you're not allowed to turn lights on Shabbos? Why is it that women sit in the back of the bus? If it's a respectful question, they're entitled to an answer. The way I approach the answer, and I suggest you do the same, is I ask the person, do you want an answer based on secular values or based on Torah values? So secular values. Secular values, the reason we do anything based on secular values is because we feel like it. Because that's the ultimate secular value. Secular values is you do it because you feel like it. And if you don't do it, it's because you haven't got the energy to do it or because you don't feel like it. No. I mean by Torah values. Torah values? Okay, now you're on my turf. So then I will explain to you, and we tell them the MS. That's why I just say the truth and say why we don't go to the army or what it is we have against an unfiltered internet and so on and so forth. Just tell the truth. If a person at some point says, yeah, but I don't agree with that, we weren't talking about you. We weren't talking about your value system. I had a friend once when I was in college. The guy was a Catholic, and I asked him something I was intrigued by. I'd heard all my life. I didn't know if it was true or not. I said to him, in your religion, the wafers and wine in the religious service, they actually believe that that's part of something about being part of his flesh and blood, that it's actually been a fancy word, that it's actually his flesh and blood that's got transformed into there. And I was curious. I said, do you actually believe that? And he said to me, I've always had trouble with that one. Right? I was going to say to him, yeah, me too, especially since on the back of the package it says Hadar on the wafer package. I don't, how do they fit him into the box? I don't know, but kind of big. But whatever it was, I'm asking what we call in Gemara learning Lishitasra. Lishitasra, I don't agree with it, but Lishitasra, how do you account for this? And therefore, when somebody says, you want to know why we don't go to the army, why you want to know why we do Shabbos, or how the segregation of the genders, you want to know why? Lishitasra, I'll explain to you. I'll explain to you why. But I've taken you in. If it's according to the secular value system, well, let's not confuse the issue. I'm not talking about this because we're not secular, and this is the secular value. And if it is a secular value, the answer is a value only because somebody decided that that's what they feel like doing at that time. So that's just as a hakdama. So when a person says, how could a Haredi Jew behave a certain way? What's the emes? The answer is the truth. L'shita seidu, not according to the secular perspective, because the secular perspective, you think that we think we're perfect. From a Torah perspective, the reason a person can behave that way is because the Torah was given to us as human beings. We're not malachim. We have a Yetzer Hara, and once in a while, we lose ourselves. Once in a while, we forget. I remember myself, I think 12 years ago, I spoke Lashon Hara. It happened. So there is a certain amount, we're human beings, and as human beings, we have shortcomings and failings. Now, what they want to know about a Torah society. So a Torah society, people are always curious, okay, what's in it for me to become a Torah Jew? I mean, you look like you are a bunch of black-hatted, restricted, and unaware. That's always one of the favorite canards that they hurl at us is, we are unaware. So one time in class, I once said to the guys in class, okay, we're unaware. Can anybody here name the premier of China? Silence. So first of all, I don't know if it's a premier or a president. I'm not sure which one it is. Not one guy in the class said, I understand you guys are so unaware. You got the biggest country in the world. Right? They're about a 1.5 billion. By now it's 1.6, and now it's 1.7. I'm not sure exactly how many there are. You got the biggest country in the world, and you can't even tell me who the president of the country is. You can't tell me who's the leader of the country. So you're unaware. Right? You're unaware. So they think that we're unaware. We'll speak about awareness and unawareness, but just realize how they're looking at us as somewhere hidden behind us. We are turtles in a shell, and we're unaware of what's going on in the world, and we are living in some sort of cloistered society which keeps us closed off from anything that's going on in the world. So first of all, one of the things we want to point out is that in a Torah society, when you compare the two societies, so Chazal say, mitoch genusan ata shomea shivchan. When you hear the criticism of the person tells you what level the person is on. I remember one of my fondest memories growing up, my older brother, who was the family scholastic star, and I graduated high school when he was about 16, and he was always getting A's. And I remember once his grades started slipping. And my parents had a meeting with him because he came home, I think he had a 92 on a test. I was so happy, right? They were, like, what's happening over here? He's not studying enough. I had a 77. We went out to a restaurant that night, So, if he's being criticized for getting a 92, that tells you who the person is. So, in a Torah society, if a Torah Jew ever steps out of line, that makes the front page of the newspaper. If a Torah Jew, I try to tell people, I have a son learning in Mir Brachfeld. Mir Brachfeld is 700 Talmidim, 800 Talmidim, whatever it is. He's in the yeshiva for 5 years, and not once in 5 years was he or any Talmid in the yeshiva involved in a fist fight. Could you imagine 600 males between the ages of 18 and 22 in one dormitory, in not one fist fight in 5 years? Could you imagine? Now let's substitute any other nationality. It was Italians, okay? At least, all right. It was Irish. Right? Could you imagine what would happen? How many it would take? It wouldn't take 800. It would take 3 of them, right? In a course of 10 minutes. So when you're looking at the society, let's take a look. So one time you saw 2 Jews fighting each other. People say Jews are always fighting. That's not true. Jews aren't always fighting. Jews almost never fight. If a Jew raises his hand, he's called a Russia. Jews may argue and they may bicker about whether or not we say Lam Natseach on the day after, on Isru Chag, because that's really bad stuff. But at the end of the day, Jews aren't always fighting. We talk. We like to express our opinions. Let's take a look at the criticism, and from the criticism, then you see, when I first started learning in Kollel, I sat down with my chavrusa. My chavrusa was a public school guy. It's called what they call an FFB, which stands for either from birth or fractured from birth, as the case may be. And I was a day school kid, and I went to a yeshiva high school, and I told him I had a memory. If there's one moment in my life I'd like to do over, it was in 8th grade when we came in from recess, so we were all hot and sweaty from playing baseball, and we were all standing in line by the drinking fountain. There's a long line, and one guy at the back of the line, today he's a lawyer, at the back of the line, this guy he's the last guy in the line, and he just goes out loud, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech haolam she'akol nהיה b'dvaro. And so, like, we all just, okay, what are we going to do? Bracha levatala. So being a bunch of little goobers, we got out of the way, and now that's a moment I'd like to have back. I would like, because I was thinking to myself, what should I have done? And I know what I should have. What I should have done is I should have turned around and said, now what? And we should all have done it together. So I said this to my chavrusa. My chavrusa was much older. He's a New York public school kid. He said to me, Ashrecha. That's the trouble that went on in your school. He said, I went to public school. There was an ex-boxer who patrolled the lunchroom in order to maintain discipline, and every single day somebody got beaten up by him. He said, that's the difference between their world and our world. And therefore, we're trying to show, but what is a Torah world for people who have no idea? People are looking in from the outside. What happens in a Torah world? What is the milah of a Torah? Well, let's compare the society. Do we have flaws? Yes, we have flaws. And if a Jewish man is caught embezzling and it makes the front page of the newspaper, we're embarrassed, we're ashamed. And if somebody says, how could he do such a thing? The answer is that the Torah at Sinai was given to FFBs. It was given to Dor Deya, the people on the highest level. And that same Torah says, lo sirtzach, lo sinaf. That Torah says, don't do the things that a human being is capable of doing. We never said we're flawless. We never said we're not capable. As a society, we're doing pretty well when compared to the rest of the society, to the rest of the world. But we never made the claim that you think we made, that we are beyond any sort of temptations and any sort of mischief or misbehavior. The Ben Yehoyada says a famous mashal that the Ben Yehoyada gives. There's the mother lion, and the mother lion has her little cubs. Yes. And I'm from Chicago. And the mother lion says to her cubs, listen, I'm tired of feeding you, and I'm tired of cooking and cleaning for you. You guys have to go out and fend for yourself. It's time to go out and do your own hunting. So they say to the mother lion, okay, where can we go? He says, listen, the lions are the kings. We're the kings of the forest, kings of the jungle. You can go anywhere you want without restrictions. Any town, any city, you could go and gobble up anybody you want, anywhere you want. So they go scampering off happily, and they get to the first town, and as they approach the first town, they see a billboard, a giant and enormous billboard, and on this billboard there's a huge picture of Shimshon ripping apart a lion. So it's the first thing they see on the first day out on the hunt. So they immediately turn around, they run home, they say, Mom, well, you told us that we could go anywhere we want. The first thing we see is a giant billboard, Shimshon's ripping apart a lion. Mother says to them, Hagufa Raya, that's exactly what I was telling you. If it would be the daily occurrence, they would never put that up on a billboard. That's the one time in history that it happened, and therefore they made a big deal out of it. But from the fact that they're making an issue out of it, that's proof that it doesn't happen. And therefore, when a Haredi Jew is arrested in Israel, Haredi Jews, if you remember years ago, we're going back a long time, when the green line was still blue, the Haredi Jews were in Israel and they were arrested for, for breaking apart a bus. There were bus stops that were being vandalized in Israel. Do you remember that? That made international news. Could you imagine on the front page of the New York Times that they arrested some thug because he broke apart a bus stop or he vandalized the subway? Imagine that it wouldn't even make it into the cartoons. Right? Could you imagine? A Haredi Jew is vandalizing bus stops. That tells you about Haredi. And by the way, it turned out it wasn't even true. It was a bunch of hooligans who were trying to frame the Haredis. So they dressed up as Haredis and they vandalized the bus stop. It wasn't even Haredis doing it. That didn't make the front page. Certainly not in England. Right? That didn't make it. But when it's criticized, that shows you what's really going on in our society. The idea of Lashon Hara, which I mentioned earlier, could you imagine in the society at large, in a Torah world, once in a while, people are speaking Lashon Hara. Okay, it happens. Could you imagine in the world at large? The world at large is built on Lashon Hara. The TV shows, the dramas, the sitcoms, it's all Lashon Hara. And that's only the first stage. And then there's actual violence, and there's actual murder. In a Torah world, you're not even allowed to think bad about people. You certainly don't hit people. And once in a while, you slip up and you say something. Once in a while, you say something negative about it, and even then you feel guilty about it. So when you compare and contrast our society to the other society, when the person looking in from the outside says to you, what are the benefits of being a Torah Jew? What have you got to sell? Where is your society? What is your society about? We can show the person, look at it, take a look at our society. Our society is moral to the degree more, to greater extent than any other society you could think of in the world. The people ask us about mechitza all the time. Why do you have to have a mechitza? Right? And the answer is, listen, because we recognize human weakness. We're not on the same high level as the conservative and the reform. And therefore, we understand that unless we have a mechitza in our shuls, then we're understand what the human temptation, what human nature is. It's even more than that, though. Because the real secret of the mechitza is that women and men are not allowed to daven together in a shul. That's a halacha. And what we do is we bend over backwards. We make an effort. A mechitza doesn't separate and drive the women further away. To the contrary. The mechitza actually draws them closer, because without a mechitza, they wouldn't be allowed in the shul at all. So the mechitza is something that allows them into the shul. It's not something that pushes them out of the shul. And it's not something pushing them away. It depends what your starting point is. If your given is everybody should be together, and your given is that immorality doesn't matter, so then you're right. But if you're looking at it from a Torah perspective, the given is we care about immorality, we care about our rights, we care about human behavior, and therefore the halacha says they can't be together in one place. So then we put up a mechitza that helps them out and allows them into the shul. It doesn't distance them. Now I want to go back a little bit to the perception that we're unaware. So the first thing in any interaction with a secular Jew, if you are involved, it's a very, very delicate line. Because on the one hand, because we represent Torah, there are certain lines that we're not willing to cross. And one of the flaws that a person, or one of the pitfalls that a person could encounter in the world of Kiruv specifically, is abiding or buying into a hashkafa that says we have to lower ourselves and go down into their world. And our approach has always been chas v'sholom, we don't do that. The Torah approach is we pull them up into our world, and if there's any danger to any yachid that he will get pulled down because of involvement in that world, he obviously has to speak to his Rav and find out and get guidance, what's allowed, what's not allowed, and whether or not he himself is involved in the correct endeavor at that point in his life. But we never get involved if it means bringing people into our homes. Obviously, we have to bring them into our homes. So the person always has to make a shikol. What about the influence of our children? What's this going to do to our children? What are they going to hear? What kind of values, what kind of language, what kind of demonstration of behavior are they going to see when they enter our homes? How is this going to be? What's the effect is this going to have on my children? These are all very serious shilas that have to be asked. However, we do, and we have been involved, and we have an obligation to the Ribono Shalom to try to show people the beauty of Torah and the beauty of a Torah life. So a person has to remember a few principles when they're doing this. Number one, that we don't sink down to their level in any way, shape, or form. There's no gruff language and there's no behavior that's unbecoming of a Ben Torah. To the contrary, they lose respect. When a person maintains his Judaism, to the degree that a person shows loyalty to his religion, is the degree people respect him. There's so many people who have never taken off their yarmulke, whether in school or at work, and the people around them, non-Jews certainly, respect them. Jews may have an issue with them, but the non-Jews will respect them for the consistency and the loyalty to their principles, number one. Number two, if you are involved, you can show a secular Jew that you have a certain amount of secular knowledge. You could relate right to his world. If you know anything about music, if you know anything about sports, if you know anything about politics, whatever it is, you could show them to try to shatter that stereotype that we are completely victims of tunnel vision. We don't know what's going on outside us. You can show them and demonstrate a little bit. Just keep it within the parameters of proper behavior, that it shouldn't be something that you end up becomes the means in and of itself. It becomes the goal. Person gets absorbed into it, and a person forgets why he was doing it to begin with, gets so caught up in it that he himself starts to pursue that interest. And that's always the danger. That's something that we have to watch for. Now, one of the areas that people have a lot of trouble with, and this is almost unique to Eretz Yisrael, but I'd say that this applies in other areas here in Eretz Yisrael, is the question in the United States also, but specifically over here, is the question of kollel learning. Right? People are always wondering, you've seen the various insults that have been hurled at the frum community, that we're a bunch of parasites, and so on and so forth. And people are very curious. Here you are, you have a male population. I remember driving once past a certain city here in Eretz Yisrael, and somebody in the car said, yes, and there are great job opportunities here too. And I was surprised because most of the people in this community were learning in kollel, and the guy said there are great job opportunities here. He said, I'm talking about for the women, right? Because, the wives need the job opportunities so that the men can continue learning in kollel. So it's something that the world is baffled by, because the world sees usually secular education as a means of then getting a job. And most people who have been to college, the purpose of college is to get grades at a prestigious college if possible, because the better the grades, the more prestigious the university, the better the job, the more money you're going to make, which we all know that's the goal of life. And therefore, if a person understands that, well, that's the goal, and that's education has a limit. Now, why are a bunch of grown men with families still studying? If they're not studying full-time, they're studying part-time, or they're studying every minute that they could. They have a book open. I mean, did you graduate already? Why are you still learning? And the answer to the approach to kollel, I think, is something also that we have to know, because it's something we're confronted. And again, I'm talking about somebody who is asking, not somebody who's attacking. My first year in kollel, when we were living here in Israel, first year I was married, so I broke my foot. I was playing basketball, trying to shatter the frum stereotype with some secular guys. So I broke my foot, and of course in Israel at the time it was during the doctor's strike, which is a really bad time to break a foot. So they put a cast on me in the hospital. Then 2 weeks later, I had to have the cast changed. And I went into the doctor. The doctor was a secular Jew who happened to also be from Chicago. So we hit it off right away. And he was examining my foot. And at a certain point, he said to me, so what do you do? So I said, I study in kollel. He said, well, what supports you? So I said, well, my wife works. So he gave like a snicker. He goes, well, I guess somebody has to, huh? So I think to myself, a not nice thing flittered through my mind, and I didn't say it because he had my broken foot in his hand. But I was thinking to myself, look at you. You went to medical school. Who put you through medical school? Either you got a loan from the United States government, or your father lent you the money or paid for it, or your wife worked while you went through medical school. But to you, it was a value. And because it was a value to you, you were willing to invest in that value and even take money in order to pursue that value. Because becoming a doctor, studying medicine, that was a value to you. To us, Torah study is a value. And if my wife is happy to be able to work to support me, or my father or father-in-law or the Rosh Kollel are willing to fundraise for me so that I could study in kollel, I didn't ask you for any money. I'm not imposing on you in any way, shape, or form. I didn't ask for your opinion, none of which I said to him. But that's what I would have said. That's the second moment I'd like to do over in my life. Wrench my foot out of his grip and then say it. So a person understands that when we're asked the question, the answer that we give has to be the true answer. People say all the time, what do you say to somebody who asks? And the answer is we tell them the truth. If somebody asks, how do we know Torah is from Sinai? What do you say to somebody who asks, how do we know Torah is from Sinai? The answer is, we tell them the truth. And then usually the person says to me, which is what? I say, okay. So it's not what do we tell somebody else. It's how do we know that Torah is from Sinai? Whatever the emes happens to be on the subject, somebody who's asking a question, they are entitled, it is only respectful to give them an answer, which is A, it has to be emes, B, they're entitled to the answer. But you have to understand that when we explain it, and we explain it pleasantly, and we explain it in a way that makes logical sense, then the person walks away from the encounter with a frum Jew. It's a good experience. He's had a good experience. And that, more than the answer, more than anything you tell the person, is going to have the effect on his attitude towards Yiddishkeit. The same thing goes for the question of the women in the back of the bus. This is also one of the main issues in the society today. Aren't Torah Jews male chauvinists? Right? I mean, you even have a bracha, shelo asani isha. I mean, how blatant could we get? So the answer to that question is several-fold. First of all, and again, to somebody who's asking, not attacking, my first response to the person is, if we were chauvinists, isn't it interesting that when I got married, I took on full financial responsibility for the family. And people always say, yeah, but nowadays the women work. If they do, it's by choice. If a man doesn't work, in the old days when Beis Din had the koach, in the old days, the man who would refuse to go to work, Beis Din had the right to flog him. He could get malchus. If he didn't go to work, a man comes up and says, you know what, I think I'm going to quit. Beis Din says, really? Oh yeah, you want to think about that again? Off he goes. A woman comes home and she says, by the way, I got good news and bad news. What's the good news? The good news is you're going to be getting better dinners from now on. What's the bad news? I'm going to have more time because I quit my job. I'm going to be in a home. All a man could say to her is, thank you for what you've done up until now. She has absolutely no obligation. He has no legal recourse. There's nothing he could do. She's doing it willingly. And therefore, a man, which by the way, Chazal say, that the pain of childbirth, whatever the pain of childbirth is, the difficulty of making parnasa is twice as much. I don't say that to the girl in the first meeting at a shidduch, but I just want you to know that those are the facts, right? Chazal say that the difficulty, the stress, and the pressure of making parnasa is twice as painful as the pain of childbirth. That's what Chazal say. So a person says, you're chauvinist. If I'm a chauvinist, why would I make a law? Why would we have a law that puts the burden of responsibility on the husband? Why would I make laws if it's man-made and we're chauvinists? Why would I make a law that requires me to get up an hour before my wife does so that I have to go to trudging out to Minyan at 7 o'clock in the morning on a cold, frigid winter morning? If I was chauvinist, I'd make everybody else go. I wouldn't make myself go. And therefore, a person has to explain that we, chas v'sholom, there's nothing disparaging in this religion. In Yiddishkeit, there's nothing disparaging aimed at women in any way, shape, or form. For everything that is said about them, which could be interpreted with that way, there's something that is said in the opposite. B'schus nashim tzidkanios, they got out of Mitzrayim, and so on and so forth. And therefore, the answer has to be accurate, the answer has to be respectful, and the answer has to be true. Then the person asking the question sees that we've thought this out, we know what we're doing, we're not a bunch of people who are just following the blind. We've worked it out, we're pleasant people, we have a society, and we have what to offer them. I'll just conclude by telling you that many people have had the experience of an encounter with a secular Jew, and at the end of the encounter, the secular Jew says, you know what, if all the Haredim would be like you, it would be okay, right? Many people have had that encounter, and obviously the reason that the secular Jew is thinking that is because he's inundated with the Israeli media, with the brainwashing against the frum community, and then he meets an individual on a one-on-one, has a one-on-one meeting, which is a pleasant meeting. There are people who have opened their home to secular Jews, they're in their home all the time with secular Jews, their lives are changed because they were face-to-face at a Shabbos meal or at a discussion with a frum Jew, and they walked away, and in many cases it was the most exhilarating experience of their life. And therefore, a person, when you have an encounter with a secular Jew, what your goal should be, the goal should be that if all frum Jews were like you, if all frum Jews were like you, the secular person should walk away feeling, if all frum Jews were like you, it would be okay. They've never met. And that's really our responsibility. It's Yisrael, Asher B'chayas Pa'ar, the Gemara concludes, She'ehei Shem Shamayim Misahev Al Yodcha. We are the ambassadors of Torah, and it is our responsibility to see to it that the people who meet us walk away with a positive impression of Torah Jews and Torah itself.